All right, then we are going to officially start the meeting. It is 7:03. This is the meeting of the Flood Prevention, Climate Resilience, and Erosion Control Board of May 20th. And the meeting is now called to order. I'd like to go around and have everyone say who is here for the record. This is Becky Bunnell, Chair.
Greg Podleski, member.
Jonathan Dilly, Vice Chair.
Manish Jain, alternate.
Carolyn Camlet, alternate secretary.
John Fallon, member.
Keith Bradley, member.
Okay, and then we have two members of the public here, Ian Bass and Dick Mahusky. And we will go ahead then, and I have the option to move up. James Posey will not be joining us tonight. He had given his regrets. So I would like to elevate one of our alternates up to full member, and I'd like to elevate Manish Jain. Do you accept?
Yes.
All in favor? Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Taking notes.
Who, are you taking notes? You're muted. Oh,
She's on mute, actually.
you're on mute now.
Okay, sorry about that. I do have to go to the Board of Finance meeting, so I'm just starting it, and I wanted to make sure that everybody knew how to work this thing.
Okay, do you want us to take notes then, or will you be?
I can do it.
Recording. What would you like?
It's totally up to you.
I mean, I can do that if she's going to, that's great, but I can do it as well, so.
If
I
you're
can do it.
Okay, if you're willing to come back and.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. I
Okay,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you for
Bye.
setting it up.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so let's move to the first order of business, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of, I'm going to start with the February 18th meeting, which we were not able to approve in last session. Does anyone have any additions, edits, or suggested changes?
Is this the 20th or the 18th?
This would be the February 18th one. And it was sent out with the agenda.
Yes.
So hopefully you were able to just review it. I'll wait a minute for people to just pull it up.
No, that's all, it's fine to me.
Okay.
I'll move to approve.
Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of approved as is?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Now let us move on to the April 15th meeting minutes, which were also sent out with the agenda. Do I have any comments, edits, or suggestions?
I have one edit on here in section 3. It says John Dilly spoke with the Conservation and Shellfish Commission. I spoke with him about getting on their agenda. I have not spoken to them yet.
Okay.
So I'm on the agenda for both of them in the coming month.
So it should read,
I requested an agenda spot.
okay,
Okay. Are there any other comments or edits or suggestions from any other members? Okay, do I have a motion to move to approve with the amended language that John requested an agenda spot versus spoke?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I would like to move on to agenda item number 2, which is to update and discuss the status of active projects. I did send a note out to Bill Hurley. Bill is unfortunately working part-time. I don't know if you know, he had a ruptured appendix and has been out for a while. I believe he is back sort of part-time, but I'm sure he has so much on his plate that he just couldn't get to it. So I'm going to apologize on his behalf and excuse him, which is very valid. But what it does mean is that I don't have any major updates on active projects today. Carolyn and I did actually go by the Perry's Green, which is now seeded, and the grass seed is in, and so that is pretty much complete at this point. I did kayak up to the railroad bridge tide gate to see it from the backside, just to see how things were going. And it looked like it was in good shape. The project is still, I mean, they still have, the steel, what do you call it? The bulk.
Coffer dam.
Coffer dam around it. But I think I don't know what their schedule was, but it looked like it was proceeding well, as far as I could tell. I did not kayak around Ash Creek, which was my plan. I just didn't get to it. It's a much longer kayak for me. So I did not see the Riverside Drive tide gate from the sea. But I have to assume that is also probably proceeding on schedule. So I think, I don't have any updates other than that in terms of saying where we are. I do know that Bill, before he was out, had been looking at doing the dredging project for the Rooster River. And I think he was, the next steps on that at the time, this was a month ago now, were to do the surveying so that we could tell how deep the current sediment is versus what it was in the prior periods. And then we could decide whether or not it made sense to actually do that kind of dredging. So I believe that is on track. I have not heard otherwise. I don't know if you've seen anything living up there.
That's not where I live, but it's farther up the river.
Okay.
Is there still a need for access to the river from Lindbrook Drive?
That was where they were going to try and get some of, I think several of the properties, I don't know if it's that stretch or further up, they were going to try and do some clearing of trees and stuff that was impeding river flow.
Yeah, that's part of
I
it.
know that they had looked at getting easements from several of the residents, and it was actually going fairly well. I don't have a status update on that.
I won't go farther on.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll be able to get an update prior to our next meeting. But that's actually all I have as updated status of active projects at this point. Unless anyone else is aware of anything else. All right, let's move on to the bigger project, the major project, which is an update on the 2024-25 Master Flood Mitigation and Resilience Plan. So basically, you guys had all, thank you very much, given some input into 3 different things. We had talked about site visits. We had talked about which of the named storms we were going to actually have the race team do modeling for. I took our recommendations and we met with Emmeline from the town in Eli, and that we made a couple slight edits. So I just want to take you through and make sure you're okay. But and the scenario that we had talked about, and this is, I don't know if you guys all still have this is the one that was sent around. What we talked about was doing the 25-year storm both today at 2050 and 2100, which would then give us a progression of what would sea level rise look like at a 25-year storm across all 3 sea level scenarios. And then we were going to do 2 sea level scenarios for the 10-year storm, because while that isn't necessarily a nor'easter, it's probably a little bit more than a typical nor'easter. By 2050, the 10-year storm should be coming every 2 to 3 years. So it'll feel like a nor'easter because it'll be coming more frequently. So we talked about doing that in today and in 2050 to again be able to give a progression. And then Emmeline had a suggestion where we basically take the 100-year storm, and instead of doing 10.1, which was on here, we actually use elevation 11 instead, which is the FEMA AE zone elevation. So we weren't sure where they got the 10.1, because the FEMA elevation for an AE zone is 11. And so she felt like what we were trying to do is give residents something to compare it to, so that when we saw these models and this inundation, we would be able to understand what would that look like for a Cat 2 hurricane or a Sandy or a this or a that. So someone at an AE 11 would be able to see where their current inundation would go. And then if we did the mitigation at elevation 12, they'd also see, hopefully, that they, presumably, if we do it all along the coast, they wouldn't actually see any flooding in their area.
But aren't most of the houses built at 11 feet elevation? So if you do 11, they probably would be submerged, right?
It depends where you are. I mean, you can basically map through LiDAR sort of the elevations really of all through a GIS mapping, the elevations of our whole floodplain in essence. But as you go further up, you're going to get presumably less innovation. But some houses have been elevated too.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like our houses are at 11 feet today, as per FEMA, right?
If you have raised it.
Typically, you'd be more than
Plus,
that.
we have
What is it, plus?
we have plus
or
one
two?
here. I think we were going to
Okay.
plus 2. We have
Yeah,
definitely
in
plus
Milford,
one.
it's plus 2.
I'm pretty pretty sure we were only +1, but.
I think the new regulation is 13, I think that's what we are asking.
Well, the building code
Lowest.
requires,
lowest structural number.
well, no, that's for V zone. V zone and coastal AE zone.
Okay.
But just a standard AE zone is base flood +1
+1, okay.
for your lowest habitable
So
floor.
that should be good, that's, yeah.
That's what it's.
That's minimum per the building code. Milford and a number of other towns
Have got
have a
+2.
design flood elevation of +2.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm pretty sure ours is just +1 at this point. I don't think it's +2, but I should check that because
I'd have to read.
I'd have to go back and read it myself. So assuming everyone is okay, the other thing that I asked is, I said, because again, I think part of what this exercise in my mind is meant to do is not just show the inundation levels for these various storms with these various return periods, but also give our residents something that they can relate to. So I asked them to do 2 scenarios, which wouldn't be modeled, because we don't need to model it. We have recorded water elevations for both Sandy and for Hurricane Carol, which was supposedly a Cat 2 hurricane. So that would give us in the most recent Cat 2 hurricane, which was actually a while ago, it was 54, I believe, where would the water have gone? And in Sandy, which was technically not even a hurricane, but some people would say it was a water level of close to between a 1 level hurricane, but the wind was not even hurricane level. What would the water have done in that scenario? So they can actually show actual inundation maps. They should, I'm pretty sure Circa has them, but I'm pretty sure they show us those.
Well, Sandy, we lucked out with the clock.
We did, and the wind shift. The wind shifted 2 hours before high tide, which really helped us. So I think those scenarios then, I think, will give us a really good sense of what are we looking at today, what's going to happen in 25 years from now, and then obviously with much less certainty, what would it look like in 2100, which is much more of a projection and has a lot more variability in it. So if everyone's comfortable with that, that's what we'll proceed with. Any comments? Yes.
I missed the setup on that. Was this conversation just within the town, or was this with the consultants?
So the consultants had actually made a recommendation for slightly different ones, and we are changing, their recommendation was 10-year storm, all 3, and we're recommending 25-year storm, all 3. And they had the 25-year storm, only 2, and we're just switching the 10-year and 25. And then they had the 100-year storm in 2050, which was an 11.8 elevation, and I think we agreed to take it into today's elevation, which they have it on their chart as a 10.1, but it really should have been 11. So we're gonna ask them to bring it to 11.
So I don't understand, how does their rationale match with our rationale?
They're
Like
pretty
what-
similar. I mean,
But you're saying they said to go this way, and we're saying to go this way. I'm just
well,
wondering.
the difference is what storm return period you move to. And the reason I sort of pushed for the 25-year storm period, because right now, and again, these are theoretical models, so you have to really understand that these are not, it's not that it's definitely, it has a 1 in 25 chance of coming every single year in a row, if it could, potentially. But I think what we do know, and Circa was very helpful at pointing this out, is that the 25-year storm of today in 2050 will be happening every 5 years. So it will be a much more common occurrence. And I think in 2100, presumably even more frequently. So that really, in my mind, gives us a sense of what are we really looking at as a town? And the 10-year storm of today in 2050 will be every 2.5 years.
And what do they say to that, though? I'm not doubting what
Yeah.
you're saying. I'm just saying that, asking, they recommended X, and we're saying Y. I'm just wondering, well, how are they responding to us saying?
Oh, I think they're fine.
Okay.
They just wanted to know so they could start the modeling. I don't think they have, I mean, I think in the theory that we're doing is the same thing. It's a longitudinal study over a course of years. And we're just saying do it of a slightly more intense. So that was that one. They also then sent around, which I sent you, their, what they called their field investigation plan. And so I printed off a couple of the sheets that they sent around. They actually sent another one right before we came today, so I sent that around. But basically, what they'd like to do is they're proposing sort of 3 with an option for 4 days of field site visits. They would do the coastal zone on day 1. They would do what they call the midstream segment and tributaries on day 2, the upper watershed on day 3, and then day 4 would be a follow-up, which would be they could return to low priority sites and do any other data that they weren't able to gather on those days. And the map that they showed, which I brought a color version for those that weren't able to print it off, has 3 priority levels. There's a high priority where these are the ones that they must do. Then if they have time, they'll go to the medium, which are in the yellow. And then if there is time, they would go and to the blues, which are their lowest priority. And they would do field measurements, they would do GIS mapping, they would look at salinity levels, depending on, whether that's a coastal site or not, to understand whether potentially there has been historical water there. So their intent is really to understand all the different parts of our town that are prone to flooding and be able to really kind of dig into the actual conditions at the site. So some of the things they'll look at in coastal, and this is more of this map, is, are there tide gates or any kind of, flapper valve or whatever that might allow water to come through? Are the bridge culverts wide enough to allow water to come through? If they're not, what might that look like? So that they can kind of understand in a future flood scenario, where is the risk, and make projections.
Can I ask a quick question? So I was looking at that. So why are they not looking at this area? There's a lot of study going on here, but nothing here. Is that already
So
elevated?
that's actually the beach club and the golf club of the Fairfield Country Club. And it did flood in Sandy, and it will continue to flood, but it's a big golf course,
Okay,
and it's a beach.
all right.
There's not a lot of
So there's
habitable.
nothing much,
Yeah.
non-residential.
Yeah, so
Makes sense.
what they're trying, so we had given them in our RFP 15 segments within the town to kind of focus on, with a slightly different focus for each of the 15 segments. So what they're trying to do is just go look at field conditions in each of those segments so that they can provide a educated perspective on what the risks are and where they could see resilience measures having an impact.
So another question, and I don't mean to belabor, I don't know how it works. But if we're looking at very severe floods, like what we're talking about, the 25s or more so than the 10s that they're recommending, does that mean that, let's say they come up with a plan, but it could be very expensive because that's a big storm and we're not able to, for whatever reason, the town we can't do everything we're supposed to do for a 25, so we don't do certain things. But if we looked at a 10, there's things we would have done and could have done that might not be done because we're looking at a 25 and a 10's gonna happen.
So we've actually, our RFP was very specific. We didn't say protect us against XYZ storm. What we said is protect us to elevation 12. Elevation 12 is a, theoretical
Regardless
water
of the
level,
storm.
no matter what storm. So what they're gonna show us is if you have elevation 12 protection and a 25-year storm with the sea level rise of 2100 may overtop that in multiple places, but the elevation 12 of a 10-year storm or a 25-year today storm might not. So that'll help us understand that even if we put it to elevation 12, by some certain time in the future, it's not going to protect us. And it just helps us understand as a town when that might happen.
Okay.
So we're not actually asking them to change, the scope of the project, to not do elevation 12. We're asking them, if we did elevation 12 protection resilience, when are we going to start to get overtopped, in what kind of storm scenarios? That's what they're going to show us.
And I may have missed it, but was there any report made of the original site visit that was done in, I think, April or do we get any documentation from that?
I don't remember seeing anything.
I don't remember either, and we should see something,
I
right?
saw a number of pictures on it, I thought.
I have an allied question to that. In this presentation of what their site visit will entail, did they make any reference to that site visit, which I believe the town thought at the time it was
We thought that was one of the first site visits.
That was it.
Yeah, we
So
did.
did they make
We
any?
didn't at all.
No, that was just practice. And now we're going to do the real
It ended
thing.
up only being a 3-hour
They did
site
send about a
visit.
junior person to, at least on the riverside, to do that.
Yeah, so, they did not, I did not see anything as a recap of that. I don't, saying I would have sent it out to you guys, I think if I'd gotten it. I try to, when I get stuff, I send it out to you guys. And I did not, I don't think anything. But I do think that was, I don't want to say it's a practice. It was a pre-site visit.
Good.
Yeah, count on these four.
Yeah.
And the other that I had a question about was from this is that, are we looking for them on these site visits for us to be giving them information? Or are we gonna be receiving back from them?
They're gonna receive back. Now, what they did say is
Sorry, they're gonna be giving back to us on.
at
these
the end
site
of, once
visits.
they've done these. But what they did say is the pictures that we sent them and you sent us that were in the back of our, remember we had done a site visit, pre-read, if you will? They said those were very helpful. So if there are any other
Oh, I get a ton more of
pictures
those.
that you think would be helpful, no, seriously,
Everybody's got those.
if there are more pictures that would be helpful for
Okay.
them, what they need is the address of where the pictures are,
Okay.
and
Sure.
they would value that. They said that those were really helpful.
Okay.
So, just as a.
People are happy to share.
So the other things that we should talk about is they did ask that we not send the group out because it slows them down. There's too many questions that get asked. We can't they've asked us not to just show up as a board for all these site visits because it's too many questions, it slows them down. They have a plan, they need to get these things done and this kind of schedule. So I'm comfortable either none of us attending, or if we want to put one person on each day, that's fine too. But the key would be, our job is not to slow them down. Our job is just to make sure they see everything they need to see. And if you feel like when you look at their site visit locations, those of you in the coastal area, if you feel like they're not seeing a site that we should have them see, we should tell them ahead of time. Rooster River, same thing. If you feel like they're not seeing a site that we should see, we should tell them ahead of time. And if one of us wants to attend each site visit day, I don't think that would be a problem, but they don't want the whole group, because they said they've got to move on these, and they felt like in the prior one, we maybe
Just
asked.
to throw in my 2 cents, as a professional, I'd absolutely concur. You get bogged down in, if there's too many people around, it makes it very hard for you to actually do your job.
Yeah. Because they're gonna be just, shooting
Using this equipment
elevations, they're
that
gonna,
mentioned.
yeah, exactly. So I'm comfortable having none of us go on these, but if anyone feels strongly that they'd like to go on one of them, I'm sure we can ask, but no more than one person. So why don't you think about it, get back to me if you want to go on any specific site day, but
Have they
other.
given any indication when they're gonna pick a site day? I know we have the tide schedule.
The time schedule was for the coastal, obviously.
Right.
I don't think that would really matter on the others, so
Right.
no, they have not given us any dates. And again, I would encourage us not to dictate the date to them. It would be more when they come back with the dates. But does anyone want to go, or are we comfortable just letting them? So
I
you
wanna
would-
go.
You'd like to go on the Rooster River one?
Sure.
Okay, so I will feed that back in, that we would have one, but again, we can't ask lots of questions. And our goal is not to slow them down.
Well, if we want someone to go and I'm around, I could do the coastal because I've been around, but I also don't have lots of questions. I'd like to learn.
Well, that's the key, is we can't really ask questions. I mean, they've asked us not to, so. Well,
I'll be honest with you, I heard this when we got together, and I'm hearing it again now, and,
I don't get that.
we did not ask them a lot of questions when we were with them. I mean, slowest thing that slowed us down was the car train, but honestly, I don't feel like we really, I don't remember.
Not a fur, I
I
didn't think we
don't,
did.
I don't think you and I spoke to them at all.
No, I didn't.
We spoke to each other,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's.
I happen to agree with you, we didn't a lot, but we did get that feedback, so I think we need to
No, I
honor
got
it.
it.
But I also think, this is their job, we hired them to do this, and this is what they're good at.
But they don't know anything about this area, right?
Well, that's why they want us to give them our perspective and give them pictures and tell them, you need to go to this area and look at this, because this got flooded and you might not have expected that flooding.
So we're not the tour guides. That's the deal.
Well, I think we can tell them ahead of time, again,
Right.
they've given us where they're going. So when you look at this map, if you say from a Rooster River standpoint, I really think you're missing out by not going here and here, or you've got that in yellow, which is a medium priority.
It's all I could see on that was that they were going to the top of the Rooster River and not really going down through the river.
Well, they've got the yellows going down. They've got some actually up in Bridgeport.
Yeah, good.
And they've got some yellows down here and then some yellows as we get down into Ash Creek area. All right, so I'm gonna
There's a
feedback.
lot of other flooding areas that are not on that.
Okay, and then I think we should mark it up, put circles on this map, send it back and say we would like to have Keith join the Rooster River Day.
Fair.
And I think, let's see what they come back with. I think they would be receptive. Their job is to make sure they understand our flood situation. They don't live here. They don't live in that neighborhood. And if there's things that they're not seeing, it's our job to point it out. In a very polite and nice way. Okay, I think those were our major things that I had in the flood mitigation and resilience plan. I don't have a date for their next update meeting. I think,
Can I go back just couple pieces on that? One, who are they sending?
Yeah, is it the same younger crew, or are they sending a professional crew that's gonna shoot elevations versus just?
well,
use
she was
rifles,
prepared
take-
to shoot
pictures?
the elevations. It's just that we kept her from doing that. She was prepared, she brought the equipment.
How did we keep her from doing that?
She didn't have time. She had to get down.
To meet the other guys.
Yeah, they had a very specific timeline. We actually asked them to go into an area that they hadn't planned on doing a site visit for. So we said, let's meet up at 8:30 at this thing and we'll show you the Rooster River. Their plan was actually not to show up until 10 and do the coastal sites at high tide. So they were very accommodating and we did all the Rooster River walkthrough, but they hadn't even planned on doing that. So she figured, well, I'm here, let me just take pictures and stuff, but she had brought her surveying, I mean, she had brought things to shoot elevations and do stuff, and she
But
just.
it was also clear from that, at the beginning at least, that this was the site visit. There was nothing about them coming back.
Well, I think it was uncomfortable, or it was unfortunate, let me say, that the communication was not clear. We all thought, oh my God, they're only doing one day of site visit and this is the day? And that wasn't clearly outlined to us. So, and I think that was because our project manager, unfortunately, wasn't around. So we didn't have a project manager.
That was the final question I was gonna ask you on this point, and the agenda is, do we have a project manager back?
We do not. Right now, Eli is doing it. He said to me that, he'll do it until we can get someone, but he is overloaded. And he doesn't want this to be a permanent, because he has too many other projects on his plate. So they do have to he's gonna keep the project going, because I said, I don't want to stop the project. So let me know where we can help and support you, but the ultimate plan is to find and assign a new project manager.
Are they looking to replace Wendy, or
Yeah.
is she still on a leave of absence, as I
No one has said
understood it
anything.
months ago?
No one has said anything to me. So if she comes back, she would presumably take back that role, but no one has explained. All Eli said is, for now, I will be your project manager, but I don't have the bandwidth to take it on long-term. We will be looking to find someone. So we'll just keep the project going. And the only other thing on this, which is, I think I'd mentioned it before, but there is a little issue with removal of the FEMA notice of violation on the Penfield site, which Bill had explained actually in a coffee that FEMA had come back to us. We had requested that they come in late February. We called FEMA and said, hey, come down and look now because it's time. We'd like you to inspect the site and remove the notice of violation. And they said, I'm sorry, we do not have travel funds and we cannot come down. And then somebody, very creatively, I think, said, hey, let's send an Uber for them.
You could point out who said that, but we won't.
And then I offered in an email later saying, well, I'm happy to send someone from the Flood and Erosion Control Board up to get them and drive them back.
Where are they?
They're in Boston. So they, because of the cuts, do not have travel funds, which puts us in an awkward position. Now, you made a good point, and I did feed this back into the powers that be, if you will, that, we should have our lawyers look into this, because at some point, if we've asked them to come inspect and they haven't by a certain date, it might be an automatic approval. I don't know if you want to explain.
A lot of things, there's you know, there's deadlines to present stuff to, you know, FEMA, for example. And I don't know if FEMA works this way, but for a lot of other situations, once you put your information in, the clock switches to them, and they have a certain amount of time to decide. If they don't decide, the decision's automatically made for them,
In your favor.
in the favor of the person. I do not know if FEMA has a method like that, but I know a lot of things do. And it's certainly worth looking into. They can't keep us on hold for 10 years.
Right.
And that's preventing us from doing what, that we wanted to?
So right now, so the town had basically made a decision, an informed decision. They decided that they were not going to do any work on that site until the notice of, in terms of mitigation or resilience, until the notice of violation had been lifted. So it's keeping us from doing any concept work or any thoughts about it or doing any kind of mitigation work against what is now a 400-foot wide, 8-foot hole in our coastline.
As long as we're on the subject of attorneys, I did contact the town attorney and gave him the reference case about why payment in lieu of
Oh, you did?
doesn't necessarily work, so he's gonna look into
Oh,
that.
good, thank you. Do you want to do the same thing for the FEMA? If you've got, if Philip Pierce?
Yeah. I'll write him and just give him a synopsis and ask him
To look
if there is something similar that I
Yeah.
can certainly.
That would be really helpful, I think, if you would be willing to do that, because I think you say it in the language that would be probably better than I would use. Yeah.
Is the administration under any kind of obligation to inform the Flood and Erosion Control Board what they're doing to proactively incent FEMA to remove the notice of violation, to come inspect, to do something?
They're not under any obligation, but I have been asking Eli every time I see him or talk with him, what are next steps on FEMA? Do you have any updates? And at this point, I have not gotten any updates or anything. I mean, I think, you know, we're not at the point in this project where the concept development phase would be happening anyway, but I had hoped that we could kind of almost jumpstart that part of it, given that hurricane season starts in 2 weeks. June 1 is hurricane season, but we never see anything until August, September, October, so.
Yeah, but when,
It is what it is.
On a lesser
it shouldn't
priority subject, is the young man doing the study of the elevated homes? Is he working on that, and does he need any assistance on that?
He could probably use some assistance. So Misha, unfortunately, he's our Ward High School student who we worked with MetroCog to get him access to the GIS database, and he was going to go around and map out all of the homes in the floodplain. He's a great guy. He got into a Canadian university, and because of all of this visa requirements and stuff, he said, I have to stop the project. I can't do anything until after I have done all my paperwork and stuff. So he said he'd be willing to start again in June.
Okay.
So it's on hold right now. But I actually think what he was finding when he was doing it is, you know, he has a car and he was driving around, but he also has to input it on, it's a phone app. And he was gonna have to input elevations and stuff that he was getting. So it might actually be helpful to offer to drive with him, or drive him around, just because it might speed things up. I don't know. So if anyone is willing to, I could certainly do some.
I could too.
Okay.
Ride our bikes and walk around with him even.
So let me offer that up. But I think I have it on my calendar.
Do you have any ideas? Has he calculated how many elevated houses he's going to be looking at? Do you know?
He's gonna be looking at the whole floodplain.
What's the idea behind it? Just to,
So what we wanted, well, actually, this is actually a good time to talk about that. So one of the things that I would like our board to think about doing is sort of a risk analysis of a dollar value of a do-nothing scenario, what happens if we don't put an elevation 12 up? What is our calculated loss of residential, of commercial, of town properties? And the town assessor's database has valuations on all of that. The GIS map, actually, when you look at it, you can actually click on a house and it will give, it'll, depending on what layers you've put into the GIS mapping, can take you to the town assessor's database and give you the assessed value, at least, of the homes, which I was hoping we could make some kind of informed decision or some calculation on. An elevated home is obviously going to get less damage than a non-elevated home. So if you had an elevated home, maybe you're going to get some landscaping damage, some having to maybe redo a driveway or I mean, shame on you if you have stuff under your house that you left there during a hurricane or a big storm. We all have that, but you know, that's on you. If people don't want to bring it up. But what I'd like us to think about doing, because I don't think our consultants are going to do that. I'm not familiar with HAZA's data. You might be more familiar with what HAZA's database is.
No, not really.
I'm not really familiar with it, but they were going to do some kind of HAZA's analysis to provide us some kind of financial risk scenario. But I think a better one would be to actually look at our assessed data of our town and say, what is it that, and our assessor, I want to say Ross, but it might be Russ, is very happy to work with us on this, I think, if we ask him to. So I was thinking if we could get a subcommittee that would, decide to start working on that, just to say, what is it, if we did nothing and we had, a Cat 2 hurricane, and then they can show you on the GIS maps how far that, once we have the inundation maps, how far that goes. We could then calculate every single property, its assessed value. We would do some kind of factor that if it's
Well,
elevated.
you want to use the appraised value, not the assessed value.
Okay, appraised. We could say,
But we should have the data saying which house is elevated, how much, we don't?
we don't.
So this person is actually manually going and.
That's what I was,
assessing that?
he's got a GIS app on his phone that we've put the right layers on for, MetroCog has helped us with this, their GIS person. And
Yeah, that's a good idea to do that.
But isn't the difference, maybe I don't understand it totally, but to do nothing, if you do something, the town's paying for that, right? So whatever we're
well,
doing.
maybe the town, or maybe we decide to bond it and do a special
Okay,
assessment.
but somebody else is paying for, but if you don't do anything and my house gets destroyed, I'm paying for that. So isn't it better? I'm not saying, for the town to do nothing and all the homeowners would pay for it. So it doesn't make, it doesn't.
Part of
insurance, so-
that, yes, but also part of it is hopefully you adopt the regulations so that, again, 10 years ago, you only had to build your first floor to the base flood elevation. At some point, 10 years ago, you've got to be elevation plus one, so that buys you a little bit more protection. Now, in Milford, it's plus two. Some places are even plus three, which actually, the cost of going 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot higher is incremental when you're doing new construction. And this, the savings in damages over time can be enormous. But those costs would be borne by property owner.
Yeah, that's my point. So when it feels like it's apples and oranges in terms of who's
Yeah, but I'm
paying.
saying it's somewhere in between. Your point is well taken. You don't want to have the town pay for a dike around the whole town to raise the flood elevation, to protect against the flood elevation of 20, and everybody's houses are protected. And so they don't have any losses, but the town, including all the people that don't live in flood-prone areas, are funding it. And you're right, if the town pays nothing, it's going to be paid, any damages are going to be paid for by the homeowners and their insurances. But by going and doing planning and saying, if we go and implement base flood elevation two, it would have to be borne by anybody constructing a house. We're going to go and have savings for everybody. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't get your house damaged, you continue paying taxes on it. So there's, as opposed to the house gets destroyed and maybe it gets built more expensive, or maybe somebody just walks away.
It's the grand list.
And another scenario would be, let's say that we, in out years, quite a few years from now, the town may decide to abandon some roads because they flood on such a regular basis that they can no longer decide to continue the upkeep of those roads. So now all the houses on that road have to make a decision whether to move or to abandon their homes, or drive through water at high tide, or only drive at low tide.
Or
So,
not have an ambulance get to their
or not
house.
have an ambulance get to
Let
them.
me just
Exactly.
try to save us more time. Let's say the analysis you're talking about says, if all these homes get flooded, it's gonna cost $1 trillion, or we can build something that's gonna cost $10 million or some, whatever.
And then you only have 200 million of damages.
No, but the damn, again, I'm just trying to say who's paying and making the decision is that we're not, that $1 trillion of damage isn't being paid by the town. It's being paid by the homeowners, so.
No, but what's gonna happen over
But it impacts the town's
time?
ability to do things here. If people abandon their homes, then there's no tax basis, the grand list goes down, and then the town can't function because the operational and administrative costs of running the government are not funded by one of the largest portions of our grand list, which is east of here.
And the other thing is the grand list itself will go down because the house valuations will go down. Therefore, there's
Maybe
less
not
tax
damage,
money.
yeah.
So you've seen in Miami right now, the 2 streets that are closest to the beach, their house valuations are down, well, this was a year ago now, 14%. So they have, for those houses, 14% less tax revenue coming in. If that starts to expand, our floodplain is quite large. We have 3,000 structures. If we get a significant portion of those with a 20% reduction, and that's part of the analysis that we would do. If we have a 20% reduction in our grand list, that will be
That's the math they're
borne.
doing. They're
That
doing
will
the
be
ROI.
borne.
That I understand.
That will now be borne by the
Total
whole
damages,
town.
I'm not sure, but I get
That will
that.
be-
Yeah,
So
so
I think
whether
we
it's
need-
a homeowner or insurance, doesn't matter, because some people will walk away. The question is the percentage of people that are gonna walk away greater and have a more negative impact on the town than what we're going to invest to try and mitigate that?
And the other thing is, and again, a big part of this town are its beaches. We have 5 great beaches. If they were to erode away at some future date, and we suddenly weren't, I guess we'd still be a coastal town, but we wouldn't really have beautiful beaches, would that then make it less attractive to come? And so these are all sort of actuarial scenarios that, James, who's not here, is an NFIP risk adjuster. That's his actual business for the company he works for. He might even have some models that they use when they do risk calculations for flood.
We should definitely do this. That will feed into this.
I think it really would, because they're not planning on doing it, and I think this would be something that we could add value to this plan. So what I was hoping is we could get maybe a group of 3 of us that would decide that they're gonna be the group that works on this. Would you want to? And I was hoping James would, and would one other person want to work on it?
Oh, I do. I mean, I know most of the elevated homes that.
Okay. Okay, so I will check and see if he wants to.
Many of them counted
And again, what you're saying, work on what? Helping out,
Count steps.
Basically creating a model scenario for us to look at in terms of future risk scenarios and what that could mean from a grand list standpoint. If everyone were to elevate, would that change things? Should we?
using the data he's getting from the GIS survey.
From this GS survey and from the assessor's office. And any sort of assessment, like, again, I don't know how we would decide an elevated home has, only 50% the risk, so we, that a non-elevated home, or maybe it's 90%. I mean, I'm not sure, but some people must have done those kinds of
Gotta be a
calculations.
formula.
And the other thing is, it's not just residential. There are also plenty of town properties that are in the floodplain. We've got schools, and then we have churches. So there are municipal, there are non-residential, there are some commercial, not a lot in the floodplain, but there are some commercial areas. So, what are the implications for those? And it would be, I think, helpful to sort of lay that out in a really rigorous financial scenario so that we can understand what are we talking about. And I guess, it's a little harder to do that in the Rooster River area, although I think we do know which homes have flooded. Like, I'd be curious to know total number of homes that have flooded in Rooster River. I don't know if we even know. I mean, how many homes actually incurred damage in each one of those Rooster River scenarios? Is it 70 homes? Is it 100, 20 homes? Is it 500 homes? I mean, we know how many incurred damage in Sandy, but I don't actually have that data for Rooster River. So I think those are the kinds of things that would be also helpful to do and look at assessed value of that. And were there any municipal buildings that got damaged? And in their, they're not gonna do formal modeling of the riverine areas, but they are gonna go back and look at the models that were done when they did the detention basins, I think, which was some level of modeling.
So if we, right now, we have is anecdotal from a number of different areas in the Rooster River, but that could be, we could have more anecdotal. I don't think you're ever gonna get a full.
But even if we could put
Mandated.
the anecdotal and ask people to ask people, and
We can do that.
maybe we put out a list, you know, to the Rooster River, Friends of Rooster River, can, you know,
Yep.
ask your neighbors, you know, we want to know, and how, roughly how much damage? Did you have, you know, just minor damage, 5,000 or less, or did you have major damage where you had to, you know, spend over 50,000? We could maybe give them different levels. But Just to,
If you could tell me what the specific that you'd like to know in terms of the levels and those, some of those details, man, I'd just give you a call and we'll sit.
well, you guys think of.
What we can do is maybe take one area, create the model, at least look at it, does it make sense? And then we can expand it to
And
other
then expand
areas.
it, yeah,
Once
so
we have a
maybe-
template, we can add more
Yeah.
data to it.
Well, but at least at least for the Rooster River, we could start, please, we want to know, did you get any damage, right?
Yes.
So we can-
Yes.
But I think it would be helpful to even give them a couple levels, just so we can
Sure.
assess amount. And again, that's no projection of future damage. It's not to say that other homes won't be damaged in future floods.
Yeah.
But at least we can do an analysis of what we did know and what we know.
Yeah. No, happy to do that.
So that was, thank you for volunteering, both of you, and I will ask if James is also willing to do it. But I think if the three of you could be a subcommittee on that, I think that would be really helpful. I think that's all I had on the Master Flood Mitigation and Resilience Plan, unless anyone else had any questions or comments. Anything from the members of the public? Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon any other business which will probably come before the board. Oh, I could have actually had both of you go, because Chuck's not here. I could have elevated you as well, sorry.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's, I think, the point is that we don't, if you have quorum, you don't have to.
You don't really have to, okay. So I do have 2 other items of business. One is that there is a pending, I believe it's Senate Bill number 9, that has quite a few things in it that I think have some relevance to our board in the future. There are things like, if it goes through, it has not actually been approved. If realtors will have to notify future purchasers if a house had been flooded. Right now, they don't have to. I guess that the onus is on the buyer to see if it has. So there are things like that in this bill. There are things like the POCDs of, future POCDs,
What's a POCD?
Plan of Conservation and Development, have to take certain additional flood things into account when we do that. So there were enough things that I thought it would be helpful to at least, there was one item I think was something to the effect that in I think a FEMA flood hazard zone, I don't know if it was VE, I don't know if they did, what exactly it was. No one would be allowed to increase the square footage of their home, which is something right now that what you're seeing is a lot of people are, if you have a little house, you're allowed to, within your coverage regs, you can increase and build a bigger house. This would eliminate that. And they have sort of end dates for each of
This
these.
is Connecticut.
This is Connecticut Senate Bill
laws,
9, and it hasn't gone through.
Yeah,
I'm just saying this is a pending
Sounds
bill.
an awful lot like a take to me.
It does a little, doesn't it?
Like a what?
A take.
Yeah, you know, to take it.
They're taking your value.
You bought a house.
You bought a house-
Size, you lived in it, suited you well, but you knew down the road it was gonna be worth 10 times the value. All of a sudden, they tell you.
You no longer can make it worth 10
You
times.
can't,
that.
you're the reason you're gonna sell it is because you think you can get that value because someone else is gonna either expand it or knock it down and rebuild it. Now they're saying no. So basically, in effect, it's an eminent domain play.
And this may not go through, but what I've asked Chuck to do is just do a quick review of that bill, come back to us and just say, are there any things that we feel uncomfortable about? Should we, be feeding things into our legislators? And if it does go through, I'd also like a couple bullet points on, so what is it that is changing and what is it that municipalities will have to do going forward? And I think we should then communicate that out to our email list, just to say, hey, did you know that in 2027, Senate Bill 9 says you're going to have to do this, or realtors are going to have to do this, or whatever. So again, I don't want to say that it's going to go through, because often these bills get completely edited and things get taken out. So, but I just think I'd like to keep my eye on these kinds of things and just be aware of them. And then if there is some action we want to take as a flood erosion control board, we could write letters.
Yeah, we should get a draft of that circulated around. Take a look at it.
I have a summary of the bill that I just called up. The bill mandates coastal site plan review for single-family homes in areas at risk at sea level rise. Mandates it.
Well, if you're going to build, right? Or
That's a dangerous thing, because I can go and show you, DEEP has a projection of sea level rise. It's what the weathermen would call a spaghetti plot. They've got all sorts of lines going from 1 foot to 6 feet. Pick whichever one you want.
they're projections.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, a lot of this may get taken out and it may never go anywhere, but I just like to keep my eye on these kinds of things.
But Chuck's gonna do a summation, so we know timing on this, because I don't see how it's.
Like, I'm not
going
sure where it is in
for-
committee. Is it out?
Yeah,
It's not, is it
saying it's out of committee.
not out of committee yet? Yeah, so it may still get changed. Well, I often find that the times to write the letters, if you feel uncomfortable about something, are when it's still in committee, not when it gets into legislative review and some of the other committees. That was the main one I saw that had impact for us, that was on the current. And I think the session only goes for a few more weeks, right?
That's correct.
So it could,
Safe to sound likes it.
Mid-June,
I think it's,
second week of June, first week of
Like
June.
Bill.
it's not that much longer. So if it's not out of committee, the chances of this getting through this session feel much weaker to me. I didn't realize, I didn't know that it wasn't quite out of committee. I thought it might have gotten into legislative committee.
What's it called, Senate Bill 9?
I think
Senate
it's,
Bill 9, an act concerning the environment, climate, and sustainable municipal and state planning and use of anyway, it says it was introduced in the House on May 16, went to calendar. House calendar, May 20, maybe it went up today.
anyway, let's just keep an eye on it. If we do decide that we want to take any action, we will do it through an email. And then I would ask that you guys, if you could, I think we should, or at least we'll write a flood and erosion control letter, for sure. And then the other thing, and Carolyn, I don't know how you want to, you had offered to give up the role of secretary if one of the permanent, or, regular board members had wanted to take that on.
Well, I have just spent my life as a public policy analyst and participating in a number of boards, commissions, and governmental activities. And when there's a board, there's a board, and there was an alternate, there's an alternate. And when I put my name forward, I put my name forward as an alternate for 2 years, because as a public policy analyst, but not an engineer, I figured I should say what it is I can contribute and how I can move forward. And at that very early meeting, there were only like 4 of us in the room.
And I said, who wants my chair and who wants to be
This guy is like,
secretary?
yeah, well, we wanted our alternates to be active members and to do things. And I'm like, well, okay, but it's like, there was no one else like sitting there to do this. But setting aside, there isn't a real lot of work to it, but I do have some qualms with an alternate being one of 3 leaders of a board. There's the chair, and there's the vice chair, and then there is Drew as the recording secretary. So this secretarial position really doesn't do it all the time. But for instance, tonight, Prue is not here. I am taking minutes, and I did not ask to be a voting member, and you could have if you'd wanted. But so basically, as a member of the, as a resident of the town of Fairfield, I would be taking notes and submitting them because I'm an alternate. And I think, I don't know about you, and you're gonna learn more about what this alternate, but when Becky sends something out, like, if there's an email vote and she needs a vote on something, I don't feel I'm going to vote, because if there's a quorum of the board voting, then the vote is the majority, it's the quorum, and it's not the alternates, that alternates would step in when needed. So,
wasn't a board
so
member.
because this is coming as shock tonight, maybe nobody wants to step forward, or maybe somebody does, but I would ask that those permanent board members think about that responsibility versus an alternate, because an alternate isn't always gonna be voting, and hopefully, now that there's a full board, Becky has taken this board, and Dick as well, over the years has grown it in stature and in membership. And there's a really important year ahead of us with this master plan. I just want to make sure we do everything according to Hoyle, and that nobody would ever say, well, wait, this wasn't even a person who was, the Board of Select people did in fact put both of us on as alternates, and you when you were an alternate. But I find it's a little bit odd there are only 3 leaders, chair, vice chair, and secretary. So I would ask that maybe, like I said, if somebody wanted to step up tonight, there isn't really that much to do, but it just sort of gets that it doesn't seem quite appropriate to have an alternate when you have a full board, because we now have 7 actual board members.
Correct.
And a quorum would really only be 4 of those 7 voting at any given time. So in reality, while you were an alternate and you stepped up tonight, she could have passed anything she needed to without either one of us being board members.
We have enough.
Because you have enough. So my point is that it would be, and like I said, Prue really does it, but.
I mean, your real role is to support Prue, check that the minutes are up to date. If they're not, reach out to Prue and say, why haven't you put the final updated minutes? And then you work with me to do the agenda, but you don't, normally you wouldn't have to take.
But this would be the second meeting, and I've only been on since December, or January, actually. The Prue is not, and she was not here tonight because she's doing the
She does
minutes
other
for the Board of Finance. So it's not like she's on vacation in Waikiki, but she might be on vacation in Waikiki, and.
There are times
and
If that's where the
somebody's-
Board of Finance meets, I may have to recuse myself from that board and go to the Board of Finance.
Oh dear.
In Waikiki, sure, why not?
But anyway, so I put that to the board for your consideration, and like I said, unless someone wanted to tonight, or Becky had a different option, or John as vice chair have some other suggestion, but it just feels less appropriate to me than it did that morning.
It raises a secondary issue as well, is there a reason why our meetings are conflicting with the Board of Finance or whatever else? Again, other than her taking personal vacation time, which she's fully entitled to do.
Right.
Do we need to consider that?
I mean, we might want to, right now, we have locked in our dates. They ask you to lock in your dates January, but maybe we should think about when we give them new dates
Is it
in
an hour earlier,
December.
an hour later? I don't know.
We might want to think about that.
I was under the impression that she was just gonna watch the
She's going to watch the minutes and.
do the minutes off of the recording.
Yes.
So she didn't necessarily have to be here during the meeting if she could see it
Well, I
later.
wondered, because I was concerned at the beginning, was I doing it or was she doing it? I tried to scribble stuff down.
Well, she said she was gonna
I'm
do
so
it.
trying to learn. It's really hard to learn while you're actually writing down what is happening.
I would let her do the transcription, frankly.
She said she was going to.
Right. It's okay. That's, but.
That way you can kind of be more here, and part of the conversation and. yeah,
Well,
I agree
which
with
was
you.
always even if as Dick said in that first one, we never expected people to sit to the sideline. I was more than willing to sit by the sideline and learn as we went along, as get this. So that was, but I still think that just in reality, from not even a legal standpoint, but an appropriate level standpoint, I think that an alternate serving as the secretary is a little questionable.
So let me then
But think
ask
about
whether,
that.
you don't need an answer tonight, but I think at next meeting, I'd like to bring this up again. Can all of you just think about whether this is
And we
something?
should mention to James and to Chuck, because Chuck's been on this board longer than I have. A long
He was in
time.
the meeting when
Right, and he
I
did
asked
not
you
step
to not step forward.
And he may not, and I don't want to, guilt somebody into it, but I just think that you have to think about the appropriateness and.
I mean, I personally don't have an issue with it, but I want to raise it as a board, and if people feel that they agree with what Carolyn's saying and want to step up, she's obviously stated her opinion and would welcome switching it over to somebody, if it makes sense. So I'm gonna ask everyone to think about it. and we'll bring it up next.
Just one point of clarification. If,
Good luck.
if it's appropriate for Prue to work off of it on the transcript, why is it an issue at all? Just let Prue to be the secretary and handle that. The minutes of the meeting. So is it the agenda piece and things like that we're worried about?
So let's not confuse recording secretary with secretary.
Right,
Okay.
Two separate functions.
Right.
Very good, thank you.
right. So one actually is a board function, the secretary.
Oh, the secretary of the board.
Secretary of the
yeah.
board.
Ah,
Who's
okay.
recording secretary and
She's
you
recording secretary, she's the secretary.
Right, but she's the recording
I
secretary.
wasn't aware of that distinction.
Right.
I didn't know that was what this setup was.
And that, to my thinking, the reason for recording secretary is exactly what Carolyn said. It's hard to pay attention to the tempo and what's happening with real time with the meeting if you're trying to scribble down notes and remember.
Absolutely.
Now, nowadays, we have the benefit of the recordings, which makes that much easier. And also to that point, John, you had mentioned the term transcript. The minutes are not supposed to be a transcript as such.
Summary.
Right.
They should cover the high points, but technically, all they have to do is record the
Votes.
the motions and the votes on
Which
those
were two
motions.
tonight, which were on the minutes.
Right.
And that was it.
Where's ChatGPT?
I was gonna say,
I was
or
going to
you
say
use
the same.
ChatGPT and basically you take the transcription and
Yeah, I
it gives
do
you a
that.
summary, including the votes. And it's amazing.
Soon AI will be voting
People
for
in my
us.
office use it. They
Oh, no,
record
you didn't
every
mean that.
meeting and they pull it into ChatGPT and that sends a summary. Dick, you would not believe it.
Yeah, that's very good.
It's actually a pretty good summary.
1 hour long meeting, transcript out, send out, ChatGPT 5 minutes after the meeting's done, no one takes a note.
Wow.
I always read it.
Have you seen it?
now. I've done it on a lot of meetings, but I always read it because it's not always.
Agreed.
That's what I was gonna say, you know?
I know, but still.
There's typos too, so a word sounds like another word.
Yeah.
Good, but, you know,
Still pretty good.
couple minute review versus
It's
scribbling.
editing versus having to.
Writing it,
go
yeah.
through it. So if anyone feels that they'd like to step up now and says, I'd like to be secretary, we'll take it. If no one does, why don't we just hold it over till the next meeting? I mean, there's really 3 people here that would be eligible. And you don't have to say anything, what?
You could also follow some ancient past practice and elect the person who's not here.
Sold.
There you go.
Just saying, it's been.
That'll get people to come to meetings.
Well,
I'm
the
gonna-
funny thing about that is the vast majority of the people sitting here are probably here less than 6 months, right?
Yeah,
I
this is a
mean,
fairly new board.
Right,
It
so
really is. It's actually.
that's my issue. So when I talked to Becky about that, I was like, listen, I'm just feeling my way here.
Yeah, I agree.
It is a new board.
I'm still looking up acronyms.
Right, right.
Provial, I just did that today, you know, while I'm reading through this, you know.
Good luck. FEMA has a fat book. That's
I
the
know,
name,
which is-
fat
I-
book,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
about that thick.
If it's alphabetical though, I ought to get it because I can look it up. It's like,
Well, I did send the Beachgoers Association
Oh,
guide.
yes,
Had
yes.
a lot of good acronyms at the end, which were very helpful. Coastal jurisdiction line, what is that? I'll just send it to you.
You should, I was going to say that, send it to me
I
too.
will send that to you.
Yeah.
Okay, the only last thing I had, and it's not a big deal, but I would like to think about we formed one committee tonight. I'd like to think about forming a second committee, which is, I think most of you are probably aware that the town purchased a property that's going to be a sustainability and conservation educational center. You've been very involved with it, I think. Tim Bishop is really leading the charge on this. But I would very much like part of that education to be things around flooding. And so I'd love to have sort of a small group of us think through, what kinds of things would we want to have there? Would we want to do a bioswale and talk about how that can help mitigate flooding? Would we want to have maybe some of the pictures of this inundation? Here's what future flooding will look like. I mean, I don't know how much room we'll get, but I think if we put together a series of proposals of what we think would be helpful for the town to have there, then the group that's overseeing this, Tim and I guess his Conservation Commission, can decide whether or not they want them there. So does anyone feel like that would be a fun project to work on and want to work on that?
I don't know enough about it. I mean, what you just said, I didn't really totally understand. So.
I think I know too much about it.
What is this, the Goldilocks rule now?
Too little, too much?
where is the location?
It's on Sturgis Road, near the Perry's Mill open space, Perry's Mill Ponds, open space. It started about a November ago. Tim called me and told me that it went up for sale. So I said, well, we would love a place to be able to store some of our gear. We pay for that, and it supports the Fairfield Public Schools. And I said, this might be a great place to bring multiple environmentally related groups together, and to use it for meetings or for other things like that, or whether it's sustainable, or whether it's Fair Plan, or whether it's Mill River, or anybody else who we work with, the Boy Scouts who redo all our walkways and our open spaces, things like this. So Tim and I I was on the way to New York City, I'll never forget. We were for an hour in the car. I was in the car, he was on the phone talking about bioswales, alternative power supplies, alternative building material supplies, native plant displays in a bioswale. So we've been talking about any number of things to do there. Right now, they are at the baseline. They're trying to figure out the plumbing, right? The sewage, and they made sure it was heated over the winter. And now they're working through the sewer, getting it up to Sturgis Road. But they're slowly going to be moving towards, finishing. And these are all things, especially the bioswales he and I talked about. We said, one of the ideas we said was to have a bioswale and have it sponsored by one of the native nurseries. And then, if someone came up and wanted information, we give them a coupon from that nursery to go buy native plants and after they've seen the model of a bioswale and why it might work on their property, go on over to, there's actually a nursery right behind it. There on Sturgis. So there was 1,000,001 ideas. I think right now Tim is swamped, and he's trying to keep it going as best he can. And he's doing, it's got power, and it's secure, and they're working on the baseline functions.
So there's no urgency, as you say, to
They
have
cleared
this
the
done
land.
for next month or anything like that. But I think particularly as we progress this project, I think some really interesting things might come out of this that would make good posters for inside, the bioswale for outside, things that would help educate our town resident about our.
That makes a good point. You talk about knowing too much. Well, they were talking about downstairs, when you walk in the back door of the building, there's actually an old kitchen with a countertop and a kitchen counter wraparound and a fridge and stuff in there. And I think they're gonna pull that stuff out, and they're gonna make that into a room that has countertop space, and they were gonna maybe put some, I have some connections with analytical equipment companies and things like that. So I had said to him, if you want me to make some phone calls, we could look at water quality or some sort of exhibit that talks about floodplain or flooding and things like that. So that might be a scientific approach that we could use to show stormwater management or floodplain management inside that, as an exhibit for people to see while they're there, or especially the kids as they come through.
Even something as simple as just putting a rain barrel.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that. Rain barrels and, all that, yeah.
Little stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I just think that, and I don't know how many of our town residents will actually go through it. Probably more likely to be the kids. But you never know. I mean,
No,
even the
we said
kids.
we could hold fundraisers there. We talked about, do not dare try and pave that driveway. It's all gonna be permeable, surfaces and all this, but it does abut the open space, which goes right into Perry's Mill, which is the Mill River, which ends up in the Southport Harbor and then in the Sound.
Hey, John, what's the elevation of that? Does that property flood if the river starts really running?
Really up high.
It is?
And
Okay.
actually, from the house up to the street, it's even more pitched.
Well, that's all right.
that's why
I'm
there's-
going by the street, the house is down, the property
That's why they're
is
struggling
down.
with the sewage. They gotta figure out, how to get the pump in there. And first they had to find the tank. It was inherited by a gentleman whose family had it, and he thought he'd done a little work on the inside. He put a nice kitchen in, a couple of things here and there, but he just wanted to sell it. So we worked with him.
Does it have a name? Is it the Mill River Conservation
No.
Center or something?
It's a town facility. Tim is working on the
I don't
name.
think they've named it yet.
Yeah, he's working on it. Right now, it's loosely being called kind of the Environmental Education Center, something like that, but that's where we are. Yeah.
So, again, think about this. We don't need to decide today, but if anyone wants to be on a little subcommittee that would start to collect our suggestions to feed into Tim and his group, I'll bring this up next time and we can see if anyone wants to do it.
Where is it located? Do you have like an address? Just curious.
It's near Perry's Mill Ponds. Do you know where that is?
When you're going down Umpqua, you go over that brick bridge,
Yeah.
you make a right,
Yeah.
and Perry's Mill, and Mill River's on your right-hand side, Perry's Mill Pond, the next property. There's an
So it's
open,
triangle
so it's
comes
after the
together.
open space.
right there, and that's the other thing. we park our buses, Mill River Wetland Committee parks our buses on the street and double parks it, and our volunteers double park on that narrow Sturgis, and it's right up that hill, people are ripping in their cars. So now Tim had the driveway and the property cleared, so the buses with the kids can go in and turn around in there, and the volunteers can park on the other side. And he's clearing a path, not only for the volunteers, but also for ADA reasons, to allow, every once in a while, we'll get a kid in a wheelchair, something like that, to be able to get from the house to the open space for the class. So it's a real, he's doing some really nice work there.
So it's past the open space parking lot, right, where you go into the.
Yeah, that little.
That little three parking.
Three cars if you're lucky,
Yeah.
on a good day.
But it's past that.
It's not even 50 feet past it.
Okay, I know where that is. I was thinking it was more on the pump house side, which is the other side of the bridge, but it's.
But
okay, it's that way.
that's the problem. The only thing I don't like about it, the volunteers is, and we talked about maybe even needing a traffic study there, is it's at that V, when you come out of the driveway, you're right there. There's cars coming from, and they're coming up the hill and they're coming down the hill pretty quickly.
All right. I do not have anything else on the other business. Does anyone else have anything? Otherwise, I would call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn,
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Okay, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Butch. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You.